Commodity rally pushed by a Fed hike and a volatile market on Friday. Jerry Gidel is ready to weigh in on that right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Hey Jerry, how are you today? So, everybody knew, or most people knew, or guessed what the Federal Reserve in the United States would do, but there was a positive reaction in commodities, but things changed over the week.
Yes, yes. Well, we went into Wednesday, but actually, the early part of the week, we're really kind of concentrating on concerns about comments from President Putin, throwing out the nuclear war ideas, things of that nature, the likelihood of the agreement there for the food corridor to maybe be under duress. And then we had weather issues both in South America and here in the US, and then we kind of rallied up to some previous highs here, and then we've kind of stumbled since then. Maybe on macro ideas like you're talking about here on the U.S. Federal Reserve moving up the 75 basis points on their uh, borrowing rate, and then also to some extent the markets started to look at the stronger dollar. And also going into the weekend in the harvest time period, we always seem to have a certain amount of people that rather be on the sidelines than be involved in the market. So I think that happened to also impact the prices as we went into the weekend here in the Chicago or the Chicago markets.
Yes, and what do you think has influenced this market going down on Friday for all three commodities?
Well, I think kind of feel like that oh, as I said, I think there's the technical features on things didn't make things too exciting for people to stay in a weekend. Weather-wise, the U.S. there really is not a lot of Pacific moisture in the forecast here. But the other thing about it is that the real twist on the thing is going to end up being how our U.S. yields start to come through here. Last week's progress only went up 2%, from 5% to 7%. I think we only started out at 3% on beans. And I'm not sure we're going to have a big push on that this week yet either. I think that's another unknown that some people might have anticipated another maybe a catch up week or something on uh, harvest progress in that. The interesting twist on that is I'm hearing that just last week we had above normal temps. We had some things pushing up on that, but we did also end up getting uh, the cooler weather here that's come in after this fronts moved through. And when you're at 90 degrees, you're drying down faster than you are at 60 degrees. And we've got a lot of 60-degree temperatures in this thing for this weekend. And really next week, there's not a lot of expectations for that. To some extent, I think Fiona going up the East Coast here has kind of helped pull down some of this cold weather that's come into the U.S. And that now we've got another hurricane that's out there, just entering the far edges of the Caribbean. And that some people are thinking about it going to the eastern side of the Gulf and going into Florida. And other people are saying, well, it's potentially could go into Texas, Louisiana. That's going to make a big difference as to how much rain occurs. Actually, the West would use the rain. The East is, they like it, but it's not a big a deal for them on that. There has been some moisture off and on in the southeast here in some cases versus basically the southern plains up through Nebraska.
Yes, by three commodities I meant corn, wheat, and soybeans. For the ones that have not guessed, I wanted to clarify. So, Jerry, do you have any estimates for the numbers of next week's report?
Oh yeah, we've the wire services are always chirping at us about getting those numbers together, and that uh, there's two sets of numbers really. There's the small grains numbers here, which is really the recap of the wheat crop here in the September 30th period, and that, which interestingly enough, in many cases, the harvest progress numbers are completed in late August or maybe just before Labor Day, and that, and this year we're still up to the 94% on this week's numbers, so we're still officially not completed on the spring wheat numbers here at this point. The interesting twist that I'm picking up on this thing is that on the wheat side of things is the fact that at least I'm concerned about it. From there is the fact that the last, for sure, the last month and maybe like 6 or 7 weeks, and that it's really been relatively dry and that, and there's been a definitely 2 or 3 bouts of pretty excuse me, hefty hot weather come through there, and that doesn't really help finish out any crop at this point. Time takes some plumpness of those grains, and so I'm kind of anticipating maybe we're going to lose 10 to 12 million out of the spring wheat. Not too much changes in the winter wheat scenario and that. And they say, well, okay, that's what are you getting so excited about 10 or in my case, maybe 10 to 12, 15 million less in output. I think the other twist of this thing is that which I'm really it's really switches away from the spring wheat numbers there and the overall wheat numbers nationwide. It's the fact that I think our stocks numbers uh, could be impacted by a big change in what's happened in the U.S. here on how major cattle feeding operations have utilized various grains to go ahead and finish out their cattle. And that a year ago in the spring, prices on soft red in the Eastern Corn Belt were very inexpensive, and a lot of big Southern Plains cattle operations in that booked a lot of soft red wheat and trained it into some of those major um, feedlot operations. And this last spring, when we're dealing with the reality of the problems in the Black Sea, and also the fact that the Southern Plains had reduced supplies and that type of thing, there's always going to be a certain amount of wheat being fed, primarily because it's a local grain that they can get access to and things like that. And to some extent, the stronger beef prices kind of increased it. But even then, I'm anticipating that we might have 50, well, even 60 to 70 million less wheat fed this summer than we did last year. And so that's going to potentially move my number up closer to 1.8 1.5, 1.6 billion bushels. If you just looked at the actual seasonal type of numbers in that on the production side, because we've had smaller uh, inputting prices. We did have a larger supply of wheat in the spring wheat areas versus last year. We kind of flipped around here. The spring wheat's got huge recovery while there was some slippage in the southern hard red and that. And so that's the one thing that I'm kind of, and I guess I'm going to point that out in my pre-report updates to people. And I think that's something that at least keep in mind that we could have a number there that could be higher than just the seasonal kind of numbers, and particularly last year's numbers on feed usage that the USDA plugged in were significant. Now, the overall, the ending carryover stock on wheat is still going to be relatively tight, and that, but that's the wheat side of the thing is going to be an interesting twist here to look at on the stock, looking at the stocks reports that could come through here and find a surprise.
Yes, and this is going to happen right before we record this video, but what's going to happen in the beginning of the week with the markets? What's your guess for corn and soybeans?
Well, I kind of feel like that we're going to get back and potentially bounce back a little bit and continue this kind of choppy market we've had this week. And that I don't think there's going to be a lot of people that want to get um, too negative at this point. There definitely is not a very good trend going on in South America at this point, on Argentina for sure, on their weather situations down there. And that there was even some updates this week that maybe the wheat, some of the wheat acres that's struggling down there might even be switched over to beans at this point. There, on the other side of the coin, there seems to be a kind of a big difference between Paraguay and South America, and even Rio Grande is a little on the dry side. But if you go north of there, there has been some showers in. This is usually the time of year when we start to get a few early birds up there in Mato Grosso that want to do some seeding and that. And there's been some moisture to that extent. So it's going to be a mixed bag from the standpoint of wheat and corn not being so good in Argentina, and maybe everybody talking about soybeans from there. But I think the progress numbers on Monday probably will kind of negate some of this theory that we've kind of a big push of harvest pressure here in the U.S. And so that's a positive too on the grains from that standpoint versus what, as I said before, here is maybe just a set of pre-weekend liquidation that could find some buyers back on Sunday night into early next week in the corn and soybeans from there. So, and of course, we'll start to get some of these numbers out on Monday and Tuesday from the various wire services about both. We talked about the spring wheat and the small grains numbers. We'll also get some numbers on corn and soybean stocks, and that's always an interesting one. Um, the USDA made a lot of adjustments in September on, adjusted uh, corn up a little bit. They took down a little bit on ethanol usage on corn exports are up, and the ethanol number was shaved to like 20 million. I don't disagree; those make some sense. And traditionally, there hasn't been a lot of change in these September stocks reports until the last 2 or 3 years here, maybe even the last five. Uh, we were pretty, well, that's it's going to come in near that. The trade's going to be there. They're going to be kind of ho hum numbers, but the quality of the crops we've had in 2019 and 2020 and various things like that, we've had some dramatic changes in corn and soybean stocks versus expectations. So I think that's the one thing that's kind of interesting because at this point, the basis levels that we've had on corn, particularly here, have been very stout, and even parts of Iowa yet, and parts of the Eastern Corn Belt here are still having some stocks, or excuse me, basis levels. That means the cash price is above the futures for quick shipments in that. And this is late September. Part of it's because we're not getting harvesting going on, but part of it's the fact that maybe last year's crops were overestimated. That's an easy thing to say. It's not as easy to know if it's going to happen from there. But those are two things, both corn and soybeans, that if you started staring at the cash relationships, that could be a factor. But, if it comes in as anticipated, we're still going to have some crop issues on production, and the October crop report on the 12th will be the next biggie here as we look into it. And then, as you both of us kind of heard here, there's lots of expectations for sure, and the corn of maybe a reduction in the yields out there versus soybeans, maybe not so much, but I don't see it's going to jump back a bushel either on the October crop report on U.S. soybean yields.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, it lots of things to ahead of us here. Not a lot of easy answers, but at this point, at least, I kind of feel like that nobody's going to get too short here with our friend in Moscow making interesting comments and interesting approach. I think really the last things I found today was that supposedly there was some drone attack on Odessa. Wow, that's an interesting way of making sure you're going to have a open situation for people to get your exports out of the biggest port in Ukraine. Interesting world out there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care.